Well, Chicago's population has declined for a fourth straight year. A large part of that has been the departure of black residents, more than 200,000 since the year 2000. And University of Chicago researchers say when you look deeper, the people who want to leave the most are black millennials. I sat down with a few to find out why that is. From the hustle and bustle of Chicago to the stillness and quiet of an Indianapolis cul-de-sac.
Welcome to the suburbs.
Former Chicagoan and Quincy, Illinois native Darius Norwood is enjoying being a first-time homeowner in Indiana's Franklin Township at just 25 years old. Really adulting it up.
I am. It's a transition. I remember looking for apartments in Chicago, and they didn't have washer and dryers with them, so I couldn't see myself paying for extra for laundry.
Darius says he left Chicago and moved here for a simple reason. It was cheaper.
The cost of living, it didn't make sense with the goals I wanted to acquire in my life, so I wanted to honestly downsize to a smaller city. Honestly, up my assets and equity.
University of Chicago researchers David Knight and Margaret Brower have heard lots of stories like Darius's.
A real issue of unaffordable housing and sort of unsustainable housing options.
They've interviewed 200 young adults across Chicago about their experiences as a part of their Gen Forward Race and Place study, trying to figure out why black millennials like Darius are choosing to leave. Nearly 1/3 of young adults of color they talked to said they saw themselves eventually moving away from Chicago.
Young people of color are experiencing a city that puts before them many challenges to being successful and to moving forward with their lives as adults.
If we can't get a good job, if we can't raise our families here, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go south. I'm going to leave the state completely.
Some of the reasons cited are economic and business opportunity. 27-year-old entrepreneur Chloe Barnes felt like New York City had more to offer.
And I felt for me that at this critical point of my career when my company was just starting off, it was important for me to be surrounded by resources, by opportunities, by access, and to be quite honest, by other people who had the same amount of passion and energy that I did towards starting new businesses and developing and growing and scaling businesses as well. But there just wasn't as much of that in Chicago.
29-year-old Lakita Washington of Hyde Park has similar sentiments. She's about to move to Los Angeles in September for a new public relations gig. She says it's harder to climb the ladder for black professionals.
I love Chicago, don't get me wrong, but I feel as though with Chicago, it's a lot of competition, and there doesn't need to be any competition. I think we should work sideways and kind of help each other, and I don't think we are there just yet.
Hyde Park's Taylor Wills is trying to get like Lakita. The 26-year-old grew up here and hasn't committed to a move just yet, but she feels like Chicago is pushing people like her out.
Like as prices go up and as they develop Bronzeville and as they develop Hyde Park, will it be affordable for me? Will it be affordable for my friends? Like, where should we go? Where can we go?
The U of Chicago study also notes that while white millennials may talk about leaving Chicago too, it tends to be for very different reasons.
Many of them talked about kind of a lack of direct connection to the city, right? Which is actually very different than a lot of the African Americans we spoke to, the Latinx young adults we talked to, who in many ways feel like they're being pushed out of the city, and many of which who have a connection and a commitment to making the city better.
The grass may be greener to some, but that doesn't mean they won't come back to the city that they were planted.
One, I would like to see more of us in boardrooms, help leading change at the top of the corporations that's stationed there in Chicago.
Chicago is going to always be home, but in order for me to grow at the rate that I want to, I have to move right now.
All right, so let's take a look at how the cost of living shakes out around the country. This comes from the Council for Community and Economic Research using NerdWallet and looking at income of $50,000 annually. Obviously, America's biggest cities are among its most expensive, but look at the suburb, Joliet, 18% cheaper, Indianapolis, 23% cheaper, wow. Detroit, 21% cheaper to live in. But then when you get to bigger cities, Los Angeles, it's 22% more expensive, DC, 33%, and then obviously Brooklyn, New York, 47%, and it gets higher as you get into Manhattan. So obviously cost is a big factor for a lot of these guys, but also the opportunities that are there is a big factor as well.
That's a really good story, Brandon.
Thank you. I appreciate
What
that.
are the things that you think need to happen to make Black millennials want to stay in Chicago?
Well, I think some of the things that were suggested in the study were actually having more political representation. So one thing millennials talked about a lot was that nearly all African Americans and Latinx and Asian American young adults felt like they did not have politicians listening to them, whereas it was the opposite for white millennials. So they suggest actually getting young people involved in the political process and the policy decisions. And so that'd probably be a big step forward.
Feeling more empowered.
This really hits home for me because obviously I'm a Black millennial. I'm from Chicago. I'm from the South Side, and I have left. I left for college, and then I was gone about 5, 6 more years, and then coming back, there are like none of my friends that live here, and we're all from here and went to high school here. Our families are still here. But as a young Black millennial, you know, a lot of my friends, they don't feel welcome in this city. It's like that cultural impact of a lot of the issues that are going on in addition to the finances. Did you hear anybody specifically talk about that?
Yeah, it's interesting
how
you
they're
bring that up.
treated in Chicago.
Well, yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. One of the things that we didn't get to talk about in the piece, but is really a big factor, is gentrification. Coming back to a city you don't recognize. I can relate to that growing up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I know, Jordan, you can relate too. The city's changed completely. I grew up in an area of Cincinnati that was lower income and didn't have a lot of opportunity and businesses, but I still had good memories, and those businesses they're gone now, right? So I think when you look at Chicago, that's what a lot of these young people are reporting as well. They don't have that same familiarity with the places. And actually, the study found, eye-poppingly, that people of color who expressed a strong sense of neighborhood connection were more likely to stay or express they wanted to stay in Chicago for a long time, as opposed to those who said that they felt like they were getting more distant from the neighborhood they used to live in.
Well, I think it's clear. Me and Brandon like to joke around and have a lot of fun, but in all seriousness, man, very good work on this one. And you can find him on social media if you have any questions, at Brandon Pope TV.